and the most dispossessed and disenfranchised of the population are shoved out of sight, and have bred rather too much of certainly petty criminality and, as we've seen before, radicalization. These are real issues, right? France is going to have yet another serious dialogue about how it deals with its majority Muslim population who don't feel, or many of them anyway, part of the system.
Yes, but we should say as well that a lot of Muslims actually work in France and are very integrated in the French system as well. But it's not much a question of religion. Radical religion comes as an
socio-economic.
Exactly, meaning that it's a kind of cocktail between actually misery, no prospect in life, criminality, because all these guns, I mean, they come from criminal networks actually. So it means that there's correlations. And some other terrorists have been actually convicted for criminal activities, meaning that there's some links between radical Islam and criminality. And this is the way we have to deal with the question. So the Cité, you're right. No government since decades actually took the real meaning of that. It was supposed to be very short-term cities for incoming immigrants after the war in Algeria and so on, and actually is still on. And the people over there are actually no prospect, no job. There's less and less civil education, for instance. The only state services over there are usually education, but the young teachers sent there can't do much about that. The police stations, even the policemen sometimes are very afraid to go there, and when we have to arrest somebody, they send some special police forces. So, and the population of there, we have to get some reform regarding to the city, and to get some solution for the youngsters of there. Otherwise, it's rather criminality or this kind of despair.
President Hollande actually described, first of all, he said Syria is the biggest terrorist factory in the world right now. And he said about the French accomplices, because he did say this was planned in Syria, the operation was organized in Belgium just across the border, and obviously carried out in this city with the help of French accomplices. He talked about petty criminals who then are radicalized, who then become terrorist criminals like we've seen. And so many of the people who we've named, the people who blew themselves up, who got killed in the police raids at Bataclan, and talking about the terrorists, have such known petty criminal backgrounds.
They are criminals. I mean, they claim
drug
to be
traffickers.
Muslims. Yeah, drug, weapons, everything.
And in Belgium, and this is an incredible detail, as I say, Saleh Abdeslam is still on the run, and he's considered one of the main operative heads of this Friday the 13th attack here. His brother owned a bar along with other brothers in Belgium, and yet he came and blew himself up in a bar here in Paris. I mean, what?
We have to understand that it's not any kind of rationality. We don't have rational people who act like that. It's just like you said, petty criminals. They just make bigger criminal activity, which is actually jihadism. I mean, they claim to be Muslim, but at the end, they just kill people. They start criminal activities with some drug trafficking and so on, and they switch to jihad.
Stand by a moment. We have some new information. A police source tells CNN that 3 terrorists have been killed in this operation. 3 terrorists, according to police sources, tell CNN, have been killed in this operation in Saint-Denis. Now, first we had understood that one of them blown themselves up, a woman. Another had been killed by a police sniper in that same apartment that was under siege in this ongoing operation that lasted about 4 hours in the dawn, pre-dawn hours, up until light had fallen here. Now we understand 3 terrorists, so we do not know whether any of those terrorists, any of the suspects in there, any of the targets of this raid are still alive, and whether we'll know any more about it. We're going to go right now to Atika Schubert, who is in Saint-Denis. Atika, what more can you tell us?
That's right. We are now getting reports that there were a total of 6 suspects inside the building. We now know from a police source that 3 died in the attack. One of them, we understand from BFM TV, a suicide bomber, a woman. The other 2 apparently killed with the gunfire going on in that operation. We also understand that the other 3 have now been arrested by police. So it does seem it's coming to a conclusion. It's very interesting that they do have 3 now in custody. I would imagine that there are all kinds of interrogations, investigations now, not only to find out how the attacks were conducted, but if there are any plots still in operation at this moment and how they can be thwarted. Christian.
Again, we are waiting with bated breath to know the names of those terrorists, those who've been killed, and those who remain, those under arrest. They will obviously, hopefully, be sources of a huge amount of information, at least some information. And of course, we have to remind everybody that the target of this raid, according to French sources, French authorities, was the presumed mastermind. Let's again recap. Abdelhamid Abaoud, a 27-year-old Belgian who went to Syria more than a year ago and who has returned, one of the most violent, fiercest of the Belgian-Syrian Belgian-Syrian jihadis. I'm sorry to make that mistake. Belgian-Syrian jihadis who have come back and who has also been linked with other plots that so far have been foiled. But he has been a target of a manhunt over the last several days, and he has been a target of law enforcement authorities for a long time now. He's appeared over and over again in the most revolting ISIS videos, making threats, recruiting, and generally swaggering around as an ISIS fighter. And again, he was a person of interest way before this attack. According to sources, we haven't yet been able to pin this down, but according to very highly respected media sources, he had once thought to have said to a fellow French citizen who had returned from Syria that he planned to attack a concert hall. Let us bring in Julien Théron again, professor and expert on political science and all of these criminal and security aspects that we're talking about. Okay, we're being told 3 dead and 3 under arrest. This is going to be a trove of information.
Yeah, it's good for the information and to dismantle actually future networks that are preparing already attacks. And the other point is that we see that it's a whole network we are speaking about, and it's not only a 3 or 4 person like planning something on their side and so on in their apartment, that is linked to Syria apparently with the mastermind, a brain of the operations, a lot of operatives, different means of actions. So it's a huge question. The president said these enemies are not the enemies of France, they are the enemies of Europe, and it's the case.
And we are trying to confirm right now reports from our affiliate BFM that the president, his prime minister Manuel Valls, and interior minister Bernard Cazeneuve are meeting at the Élysée, an ongoing meeting perhaps about this operation, presumably about this operation. It wouldn't be surprising. These are the things that the authorities are concentrating on very, very intently, obviously. Many people had been quite scared to think that these terrorists, some of them were still at large, and that there could be potentially more attacks. Just a couple of nights ago, I'm sure you remember, we were here, and so many people had come out to pay respects, to gather around the monument of the Place de la République here, and within 5 seconds, just about, this place was cleared because there was a panic sent out through the crowd. They thought something was up. So really, people on tenterhooks, but also people I detect over the last few days, really resolute, really want their government to step up the fight.
Yes, people are afraid, but even regarding to the reactions of people during the attacks, we have read loads of information of people on the ground trying to take care of people, to remain calm, even inside the Bataclan, in a small room where 20 persons were inside. So we see that there's a kind of adaptation to the threat. Perhaps after Charlie Hebdo, people actually integrated that it was a risk, and that people have to be resilient about that. What does mean resilience is to accept that there's a risk and maybe there will be more terrorist attack. The French citizens are under the government and so on. So what will be important to see is how the nation keeps together, and we hope that the political class will actually do the same.
And again, just to reconfirm the deaths, the injuries from this 4-hour-plus operation this morning, as we told you, 3 terrorists are dead, according to police. 3 are under arrest, according to our affiliate. And we're hearing now confirmation that 3 police officers were wounded in this raid. Talking about the police and the very obviously stepped-up presence of police, the special riot forces, certain military forces around the country, the president has asked and has had approved an extension, a 3-month extension of the state of emergency. Again, many people in democracies would consider that to be a step too far, that it's a police state. But clearly people are going to have to decide whether they accept to trade for a period of time some civil liberties for stepped-up security.
We are not talking about a kind of Patriot Act here. We are talking about an emergency situation. He asked that to the parliament when we are still in the event, and I mean, we are talking about that right now. So we are still in an emergency situation. So we need some special means for the authorities to act properly as an emergency situation. It would be different if, of course, this situation remained longer. The state of emergency was declared the longest time. It was 2 years. So we see that.
When was that?
It was after the Algerian War,
so
during the Algerian War.
That's a long time ago.
But what would like the president is to create some kind of less intense statute of civil liberties, but some kind of more, how could I say, more flexible means if there is some specific threat to act properly on a very short time, for instance. So he asked the parliament to introduce that in our constitution.
Since you're a political scientist, this is also has very ugly political ramifications. The whole refugee crisis, now trying to link these attacks to at least one who posed as a refugee who came in. This is literally stoking the fires of the far right, anti-immigrant, anti-immigration, xenophobic parties here in Sweden, in Germany, across Europe right now. And there are elections in France and in other parts of Europe in the not too distant future. What do you think the political landscape will look like after the next round of elections in the wake of this attack?
You're completely right. It's a European trouble coming in a year where there's refugee crisis and questions all around Europe, and the rise of the far right, even in countries the most developed, the most democratic countries like Sweden or Finland and Denmark. Meaning that we have a kind of political crisis throughout the continent, and the political situation is tense nowadays. So we have to find out some first security measures and to promote democracy, because it is what it is about in Europe. It's about democracy. Regarding to the French political scene, what it's all about, we have seen yesterday at the parliament, they booed the government. One of the MP, which has actually troubles with the Republicans, Les Républicains, and one of the MP from Les Républicains said that the government has blood on their hands. I mean, it's very dangerous situation to say that. So it's pretty tense, and the far right is on the rise as well. And like you said, we have regional elections in 1.5 months. For the first time, they might get regions, and even the presidential elections in 2017, the stakes are still here.
Mm-hmm. We just want to say that our police sources are giving more information. There were 6 suspects holed up inside that building, which accounts for what we have accounted for, according to sources. 3 were killed, 3 are under arrest. So confirmation that there were just 6 suspects inside that building, which was the focus of operations for about 4 hours, from the dark hours into the morning light, and that there was one woman who blew herself up with a suicide vest. We're going to go to international security expert Will Geddes for a little bit more perspective on what just went down here in Paris and also the impact. Will.
Good morning, Christian.
Give me a sense of your assessment of what's happened and how it'll impact the situation on the ground going forward. Obviously, we're waiting to see whether the big name that we're all waiting to see was targeted, is either dead, arrested, or not there, Abdelhamid Abaoud. What do you think will be the result of some of those who've been arrested today? What will they be able to provide?
Well, I think there's going to be a rich treasure of